Holy crap, is this month ever shot? Good morning, everybody. It's Stephen here for Bland Designs, and this is vlog number 102 for January the 14th, 2019. And I've just been doing some running around today, getting things packed up and ready to go for our trip to Florida. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But let's jump right in and talk about the quilt behind me. Now, my guild is having a show. They do it every other year. And one of the parts of the show is they set up a challenge, and the challenge was to use the fabric, and I'll get off my stool here so you can see a little better. They gave us half a meter of this fabric with the butterflies, and we were to take it and make it into a quilt of our own design that measures no more than 50 by 60 inches. Now, this is my design. I did it on Electric Quilt, which is a computer program that allows you to put in the materials you want to use and to design it whatever way you want. I think it's a little bit of an unusual design in what I have done, and it's not done, of course, yet. This is just the basic top. I still have a couple of borders to put on it as well, which are going to make some of those other colors in there pop, I think, when I do that. And then I have to quilt it. And I am thinking this is not until November. This is only January, so I'm well ahead of the deadline. But what I'm thinking of doing is taking a course in how to use a long arm quilting machine. And once I've done that, there's a place in the town next door to us for that. Once I've done that, then I think I may actually quilt this on a long arm. After you've taken the course, you can rent for $30 an hour the long arm machine, and away you go. Reason being is this is a show quilt, it is a competition, and I want to win. Now, I doubt that I'll win, because the other people that are doing this have a lot more experience than I do, and you know, sometimes when you go off on a limb and do something that's not really conventional, depending on who's judging it, they might not like it at all. Plus, again, I'm not as good as those other quilters, but I am proud of this so far because my points all match up. And when I say my points, I'm talking about these little intersections here where things come down into a point, a triangle, and they match. And I was very careful about that. Now, there may be a couple on there that are slightly off, but because of the color, I don't think anybody's going to notice it. Mind you, whoever's going to be judging this are very experienced quilters, so they might notice it, and I imagine that will go against me. But it's my first effort to do a show quilt, and we'll see how that turns out. Like I said, that's not till November. Let me get back up on my perch here. That's not till November this year, and well, we'll see how it goes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some other things in quilting as well, and what my plans are for 2019, because I just went to the Ultimate Sewing Open House and just signed up for a whole lot of quilt classes, and I'm going to talk about those in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about the channel of the week, and this was recommended by one of the regulars on Stephen and Walter Live. It's called Noit Art. At least that's how I would say it. I'm not sure if that's the correct way. It's spelled N-O-I-T. And for those of you that are into mixed media and journals, art journals as well, I think you're going to really enjoy this website. So here's my review of that. This week's YouTube channel is called Noit Art, N-O-I-T Art. I think I've said it right. This lady does a variety of things, mostly art journaling, but she has a lot of other techniques and tricks for a whole lot of other arty things. I find her style very refreshing, and she takes you through each thing step by step, and her steps are very clear. So if you're looking for inspiration, if you're looking for some new techniques, or you just enjoy watching art journaling processes, then I suggest you check out Noit Art. So the actual link is listed in the show notes below for Noit Art, as are my links for Stephen and Walter Live this week. And apparently with Stephen and Walter Live this week, some people were saying they didn't get the notification from YouTube that we were going live. Now, that has nothing to do with anything that I did. I'm pretty sure of that because I did it the same way I always do it, and this is the first time, as far as I know, we've had this problem. It's not surprising though. Remember, we had a lot of freeze-ups happening before. Those have mysteriously cleared up, which makes me think, yeah, the problem was not at my end. The problem was at YouTube's end. And I think this problem about the notifications is also at YouTube's end because they're probably screwing around with the program again, and every time they fix one thing or add something new, something else gets all bunged up. Of course, YouTube doesn't give us the pleasure of being told that this is a problem at their end. They say nothing. They just let you sit there and stew and worry that it's a problem you've created. I'm pretty sure this is not a problem I've created though. The only thing I can suggest is it may have something to do with the notification setup. So if you go back on to my channel and click the bell, but remember it's a toggle. So watch, when you click that bell once, at the bottom of the screen will come up a little black bar and will say that you're getting notifications or you're not going to get notifications. If it comes up and says no notifications, then just click the bell once again and it will toggle it so you will get notifications. That's the only thing I can suggest, and we'll just have to hope that once again this is a problem that will correct itself over time. But just a reminder, unless I've told you in the vlog or on a previous Stephen and Walter Live, we try to come on the same day at the same time always. So it's usually Sunday afternoons at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you can figure out what your time zone is and how that works with you, then you'll know that's when we're coming on. Of course, there is usually one Sunday out of a month because I teach an art journaling class where we come on 1 hour later. And we're about to go to Florida, and I'll say more about this in a few minutes, but there may be next week, it may be a possibility that we come on at an erratic time or we don't come on at all. But we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Also in the show notes below is the link to this week's book we'll talk about in a minute. And we have a little special Stephen and Walter Not So Live, which I know a lot of you saw it because after only being up one day, we had over 100 views. That's unusual. I'm not a big channel. But I guess people love haul videos, and that all had to do with us cashing in our points that I have talked about over the last couple of weeks and the problems we have with that. And I'm going to give you an update about that as well. Needless to say though, we got our points back and decided to spend them. So there's a link to that video below, and we tried to do it in a fairly light and humorous way as well. Kind of like doing a parody of all these people who put up haul videos all the time. Although people seem to like them. And I have to admit, I kind of get sucked into the haul videos too. I want to see what people got at Dollar Tree and stuff like that. I don't know what the fascination is with other people shopping, but I guess it's something. So all that's down in the show notes below. So that takes us to what's pissing me off this week. Sorry, my American friends. It always seems like since Trump went into power that all I do is bitch about the American government. I'm sure you do too. And lately we've been trying to hold back on that, but I can't hold back today on this because we're about to go to Florida, okay? First of all, I said way back I was not going to travel in the United States again until that idiot got out of power. Well, we are going. Broke that little rule. Well, more or less Walter broke the rule, but I'm going along with it. We've had kind of a trying time this year, ever since last February when we got back from Australia. You know, how could you not know? I've harped on it so long, sorry. That's a Canadian thing, isn't it? Sorry, we do say that a lot. Anyways, with my mother, right? You know, when we got back, she was falling, and then she got in the hospital, and she's in the hospital for 4.5 months, and then we finally got her in a nursing home, and then we had to deal with her transition in the nursing home, and we are pretty much worn out. Okay, that and along with everything else that happens in life, you know, we're a little worn out. And I got to say, I thank God for Walter, because he's been my rock through all of this. You know, there's not a lot of people that would put up with this kind of crap, and he did. So when they had a seat sale on Black Friday on Air Canada, he booked us to Australia. Well, that was something that was already in the works. But then he said, seat sale for Florida, it was really good. Booked us to Florida for a week. And we'll talk more about that later. But why is this pissing me off with Trump? Okay, it should be a simple matter to go to the airport. We're going to the airport tonight. We're staying overnight at the airport. We have a hotel room. Our flight leaves tomorrow morning, Tuesday at 10:40. And we have to go through American Customs. But here in our part of the world, we actually go through American customs at the airport here, not when we get off the plane in the States, which actually is much more convenient in many ways, because you get that over with and done, so you just can go right down, pick up your suitcase, and away you go. And that's been happening for many, many years. And once we go through customs, although we're in Canada and we're in Toronto, we are now on American territory. It's sort of like, you know, embassies, that kind of thing. That's all good and fine, no problem, except that the employees who man the customer, I want to keep saying customer, the customs area are all employed by the federal government of the United States. And the federal government of the United States is closed down, as everybody knows right now. So these poor federal workers are not being paid. Excuse me. For some reason, I've had this cough lately. I don't know if it's my medication for my blood pressure or what. It's supposed to be one of the side effects. So the airport is telling people, if you're going to be flying to the States, then be at the airport checked in 3 hours before your flight. Now, that is something we usually have to do when we go on international flights, but with flights from domestic and going to the United States, usually it's only in 2 hours or something like that. You can get there. Not now, because they may only have one agent on, and there'll be a ton of people trying to get through customs. So we decided the best thing to do is get a hotel room the night before, and we're going to get up at the crack of dawn. It'll be before the crack of dawn, actually. We'll probably have to get up, well, if we have to be there 3 hours before, so work backwards, 9:30, 8:30, 7:30. We'll have to be up about 6:30 to get to the airport. Now, somebody told me that their daughter, one of the ladies at the Ultimate Sewing Store when I was there on the weekend, said her daughter just went to the States last week, and she only had to wait about half an hour. She got through the line no problem. Yeah, but she was taking a night flight. We're taking a morning flight, and apparently up until about 10 o'clock in the morning, that's supposed to be the worst time. Maybe we'll slightly miss it. I don't know, because our flight's not till 10:40. I'm hoping for the best, but I'm expecting the worst. And I don't like airports to start with, because you never know where you're supposed to go. Nobody there to help you, at least not in Toronto Airport. They just won an award for one of the best airports in the world or something like this, and I have no idea why they bought that award, because they are horrible. And I've been to a lot of airports in the world, and yes, there are other airports that are a lot worse than Toronto, but Toronto really sucks. And they can't do too little for you. And they have all these automatic kiosks now where you've got to go in and put in your passport, put in your ticket you've printed from your computer at home, and it scans all this stuff, and half the time it rejects me. It never seems like to read my passport for some reason. And you know, you've got your bags sitting there, and there's people behind you waiting, and I just find it all a lot of high pressure. Then they have a kiosk now for checking in your bags. So you go to this, and you have to lay it on a conveyor belt, and there's an armload of instructions this long. And yeah, guess what? Walter's bag goes right through, no problem. Mine, it rejects it. It keeps rejecting it. Last time it was because it said you could put it on, and it has cameras. It reads all over the bag, so it can read the boarding pass you printed out at the other kiosk. But for some reason on mine, it didn't like that. So finally there was somebody there who did give me a hand and flipped my suitcase around another way, and then it went through. But it's just annoying. And that's just on any flight anywhere in the world out of Toronto. Now we have to contend with the stupid American customs, which will have some disgruntled employee working there, and I don't blame the employee for being disgruntled. So the bottom line is, because of Trump and what he's doing with the shutdown of the government, we might not get to Florida. I mean, what's stopping these guys, if they're not being paid, to not show up to work? Who's going to take over? And that would cost us a lot of money and a lot of frustration there as well. And then Walter says we might get there, depending on how much longer he keeps the government shut down, we might not come home. That one I'm not so worried about. I would be if I had to be someplace. Well, actually, I do have to be someplace, as I'll talk about in a minute. But it's not a life and death situation. So we just extend our vacation in Florida. Maybe. I don't want to do that either, because that becomes costly as well. But, you know, really, how can, and here's the crux of what I'm pissed off at. How can a country like the United States that claim they are the world's leader in democracy, they're not, okay? How can they give one person, the President of the United States, that much power that they can shut down the government and put 800,000 people out of work? Excuse me again. I don't get it. And they vote apparently 4 times a year for their budget, and if that doesn't get passed, then things get shut down. That's not how it works in our country. In our country, yes, we have a budget too. We have federal budgets and provincial budgets. Each year, each level of government presents their budget to their people. If it gets voted down, that's called a non-confidence vote. That means that the government doesn't really shut down. Everything carries on in the federal government and the provincial government as usual. Just means we go to an election and vote in a new government. But it doesn't shut down and cripple our country. So why is it that that's the way it works in the States? It's just plain stupid. And it's another country, but it's affecting me. And that's why I'm pissed off with Trump, that he has this effect on the world. People, Americans, I feel so sorry for you, the average American. There's so many things that are wrong with your government system. And you've been told for so many years and so many generations that it's the best in the world. I'm sorry. If in my opinion, it's not even close. Come live here. It makes our country look really good. And our country is really good. Okay, off my soapbox. Product review. Haven't bought much. This probably won't be much interest to anybody else. It's a ruler. It's made out of stuff that is heat resistant. And what's it called? It's called the Press Perfect Ruler. I saw this on YouTube. And basically, it's meant for people when you're hemming pants or skirts, something like that. Because it's all marked off here. You just put it at the edge of your fabric. And you fold the fabric over, and then you compress it, and you get a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch seam. That's perfect. Normally, I do this by simply, you know, I eyeball it most of the times when you're doing something like that, because you just don't want the raw edges. And you press it and do that. But sometimes you do want a very accurate seam allowance, and then so you got to get out your little ruler and some marking tools, and you got to mark it, and yeah, it's a bit of a pain. So I thought this might make life a little easier. This is just a piece of basically like cardboard, and it's kind of fuzzy, so that must be the heat resistant material. But you would think something like this would be cheap. No, not cheap. Price tag isn't on this. $30. It cost me $30 for a piece of cardboard. Now, actually, I did see a YouTube video where they talked about just taking a file folder, a piece of cardboard, marking your measurements on that, and you could use that instead. But you know me, I have to have the real toy. So anyways, that's all I bought this week. Not too exciting, I'm sorry. Okay, so that takes us to the book review of the week. It's actually a magazine, a little thicker than a magazine. This is a company that doesn't exist anymore. Simply Scrapbooks was the name of the company. I used to buy a lot of their magazines because they were all done thematically, and they really helped me when I first got into scrapbooking, learn techniques and things like that. It's a wonderful magazine, a lot of advertising in it, but lots of pictures of layouts and techniques and things like that. This particular one is Scrapbooking with Color, and the reason I picked this one, and in future vlogs you're probably going to see a few more in this series by Simple Scrapbooks. Why I picked this because a lot of people, when I worked at the scrapbooking store, would come to me and go, I don't know what colors to use, or how to pick colors for backgrounds and frames and embellishments and stuff. And it's not that difficult, but some people are really, really picky about the colors they want. They want the exact perfect color. So this book really helps you with that if you're one of those kind of people struggling with color combinations. It's based on the whole idea of the color wheel. The color wheel is a really useful tool, but the color wheel can be confusing too, because there's all these fancy terms like analogous colors, complementary, you know, stuff like that. So this little book takes the mystery out of that as well. So if you're interested in looking for a copy of this, this will be the trick, trying to find it. I went on Amazon, could not find it on Amazon. I found it on eBay, and I'm not sure how much they want it for that. Yes, I do. On eBay, they had it for $6.66 Canadian. I think when I bought it originally, it cost me $23.25 Canadian. However, having said that, the shipping on it though is $23.31. So basically it's 30 bucks Canadian to get this. So, you know, it's up to you. It is an excellent book, however. But maybe there's other sources where you can find it in your area as well. But this company doesn't exist anymore. So why am I telling you about it? For something you can't get your hands on easily? Who knows, you might find it on a garage sale or something like that, or, you know, put out a feeler on something like Kijiji or one of the other, you know, online shopping or trading kind of things. Someone might have one in their stash that they'd be happy to get rid of for a few bucks. Whatever, you never know. Okay, so talking about scrapbooking, this is my next part in my series on the evolution of my paper crafting, featuring my early days with scrapbooking. And this week, in the video clip, I'm going to talk about a specialty scrapbook that was all the rage when I first got into scrapbooking, called All About Me. So here it is. Today's discussion about scrapbooking, I want to show you some specialty albums, and I'm going to show you some specialty albums throughout this series as part of my evolution. But before I do that, I mentioned last week about how I got started with scrapbooking, and that was with a system called Creative Memories. And as I mentioned, Creative Memories had a lot of special little cutting tools that I thought were kind of neat at the time that allowed you to cut circles and ovals and that kind of thing. It was a very basic form of scrapbooking. I didn't think that I could find the first album that I ever made, and it was a gift to my parents based on a series of pictures that they had received from a couple of friends who had passed away at one point, and yeah, that sounds good, passed away at one point, whatever, had passed away, and they had gotten all these pictures. So I thought it would be nice to put them into an album for them. So this is the album. I found it. I forgot that I had it here, and I came across it, so here it is. So I'll show you what this looks like first. So we start with the opening pages. I see that the cover's kind of coming off. This is almost 20 years old. And you can see here that my pictures are all very, get the glare off, a whole lot of circles. I was really fascinated with circles. Plus this company also had a lot of die cuts and things, and at that point I hadn't really gotten into digital scrapbooking, but there's a little bit of a suggestion of this with the way that I did these particular pages, because I scanned and cut out some of these die cuts. Now as I look at this book, I realize that this is not the original book. My mother still has the original book somewhere. This book, before I gave it to them, I scanned each of the pages so I could have a copy of it for myself. Oh yes, here's a fun picture. Guess who this is? I'll bring it up a little closer. The guy in white. That would be me. And I'm not sure how old I was in that picture. Probably in my very, very early 20s at that point. Boy, that's a million years ago, eh? So you can see that this is the style of creative scrapbooking, and or creative memories. And they also had little, fun little stickers and things. They had border pieces as well. So this was something that I created. It was really my first venture into scrapbooking. Here I got a little fancy picture of my brother that I did in a kaleidoscope pattern. And actually, this might be foreshadowing my quilting, because this looks like a quilted page, but it's not. There is some journaling in here. I never liked my own handwriting, so I did my journaling using my computer. Some other pictures here, some friends, and it just went on. And I realized too that in this particular album as well, this was not the entire album that I gave to my parents. I carried on with some other pictures. I do actually, these pictures are a friend of mine who was a champion baton twirler, like world-class baton twirler, and a friend of his wanted to take a lot of these pictures and make an album for him, so I did. So these are actually, the album was a 12 by 12. I must have scanned all the pages so I would have a record of it. And then some of these were pages that I scanned out of other scrapbooks that I had done and had given away to people, and I wanted to keep a record of them. So I did like Creative Memories albums. They were very high quality. The only thing I didn't like was this strap system that they had, and you had to have these special pages that have little wire hinges down in here. And as you can see, this one's coming apart, but actually it's not broken. I think that little thing just needs to be stuck back into there. So anyways, that was my very first, or an example of my very first scrapbook album. Now last week I showed you one of my earlier albums. I got into doing some specialty type of albums after a little while, and one of those was called The Book of Me. This was based on a book that had come out at the time. I can't remember the author's name, but I think I featured this book in one of my previous blogs way back, where basically it talks about doing a scrapbook about yourself. The problem with scrapbooking is we so often are in behind the scenes. We take the pictures, we put the pages together, and we aren't usually in these albums. So it was suggested that we do a book of me, and I took a couple of classes where we focused on this. This was supposed to be an ongoing kind of thing, and I do have several volumes, and I'll show those in another video at another time. But here in the very first page of this album, I actually talk about how I got into scrapbooking. And then I had old pictures from when I was born. Yes, that's little me right there, and that's little me with my father and with my mother and my grandmother, my uncle, my grandfather. My grandfather, I don't remember. That was my mother's father, because he passed away in 1959, and so I was only 2 years old when he passed away. But you can see here I did a lot of journaling in this, and again I used my computer to do my journaling because of my handwriting. And now that I look at it, it's set up by years. This is 1957 to 1961. And here I did a whole lot of journaling. I think at the time when I did this, I made the joke that when I end up in a nursing home and I can't remember anything anymore, I would always have my album to remember who I was. And it goes on from there. Pictures. Now you can see my style is still, I haven't matted, excuse me, I haven't matted my pictures. I did though find some of these little gold photo corners and thought those were fun, so I put those in. Now I did a little bit of matting here. I put in some ribbon as well. The scrapbook paper at the back at that time, basically there wasn't a lot to choose from, not like there is today, and the style at the time was get as many pictures as you possibly can on a page in an attractive formation. Now here's a fun page. I'll have to set this on an angle so you can see this little pop-up here. Evolution or devolution, I guess I called it. And these were all pictures, school pictures, through the years of me right up until when I became a teacher, which was kind of fun. Then this book of me also talks about my relatives, so my grandparents on my father's side and my grandparents on my mother's side. Again, a lot of journaling. And here I started to explore the properties of mulberry paper, as it was called, a very fibrous paper. Then I got into my school days, and these, I thought this was very clever. Again, here's where I'm using my computer to start combining it in with scrapbooking. I'm not yet into digital scrapbooking. That comes a little later on, and I will show those in another video. But these were my actual report cards at the time, and what I did was I scanned them and shrunk them, laminated them, and printed them out. So they're miniature versions of all of my report cards when I was in elementary school. And I found this special little pocket page. Today you can make these using what do they call it from the We Are Memory Keepers Fusion tool, or whatever it's called. But at the time, I think, actually, I don't even think I bought specialty ones. I think I created these using some other kind of plastic insert. And here I'm cutting out things. I got a little fancy here using my computer. I scanned some background material, and then I hand cut out these letters. And then I was adding things about the time period as well. I found this website that talked about this day in history, and you know, those kind of things that tell you what went on, what the best movies were, what the best songs were, all that kind of stuff. And then I had some old newspaper clippings of various things I had done when I was a scout, and some awards and things. And again, I scanned these and just dropped them into the album. Now you can see the background paper I picked for this is kind of hideous, way too busy for all of this. Same idea here. Now this was my first cat when I was growing up as a kid, and here I tried a little specialty technique, the mosaic tile technique, which at the time was a brand new technique. There was special equipment. You got a special cutting mat and special X-Acto knives and grid paper and everything, and to help you create something like this. I have done this since as well, and I created my own system for doing it. And here was a fun one. I decided to make a little spinner, and it was marked with each year with a picture of me from in about these different years. So that was something a little different too. I probably got that idea from a magazine or a book. At the time I was buying a lot of scrapbooking magazines and a lot of scrapbooking books. And many of those I've shared with you in my vlogs. A play that I was in with the newspaper reviews and things like that. Picture of the cast. And just carried on. Here's another miniature report card. This I took pictures from high school, from a high school yearbook, and I tried to make these 2 pages that held my text to look like a scrapbook, or a, you know, what do you want to call it? A yearbook page. And this one has a little pocket. So actually, if you can get in here, you can. Been closed for so long it's very difficult to get into it. Let's see here. This would come out, and so you've got this little miniature. These are newspaper clippings of things that I had done in high school and in the community and things like that. I was mayor, don't you know? Mayor for a day in my town. It was a program that was put on by the town council for the high schools, and I got selected to be mayor for a day, so that was fun. And for my short-lived time as a tennis player, I was in university at that point. I thought I'd take up tennis one summer. Look at that hair. You see that hair? I had, and this hair too. That's my graduation picture from my first degree. Look at it. It's an afro. It's a perm that's gone terribly bad. Picture some of the guys. Of course, you can tell the era, the way we're all standing. Year later, I was at Teachers College, and I had my graduation picture redone, and my hair, very different. I had got contact lenses, and even, okay, you can tell, this is the 1980, this look here. That was a body perm. And look how long my hair was, and look at the color of it. My hair's not that color anymore. This moves up into the mid-80s. There's me. Now my hair was gray there. Got rid of the perm. Yeah, skinnier too. And then this was a page. This page that I did in here. I actually got this page published in one of, I think it was Creative Keepsakes magazine. One of their specialty books about doing heritage pages. And these are my ancestors. And this page got published, and I was very proud of that. And then there's different topics too that this book, that this is all based on, gave you ideas to do, like pieces of me, things like that. When I first became an uncle, it's my first niece who's now married, and my oldest nephew, and my sister's children. And then this was at a time there was something called secret journaling, and I don't even know if I can, yeah. So I made these little flaps, and this was just my feelings at the time about my nephews and nieces, because they were moving out to BC and I live in Ontario. And so really, when they all got moved out there, haven't had a lot of contact with them since. So it's, you know, years. And then there's things like what important things. This was a painting done by my grandmother, which meant a lot to me. It's not the best work of art, but it's probably where I got some of my interest in being creative. And this hangs in my living room. And just talked a little bit of story about behind that picture. And then there was something called A Day in My Life. And there's my little Cleo, who's been gone now almost 4 years. Hard to believe. And I think at this time, this was when I was working from home, doing virtual school. And this was a joke picture. That was one of the ladies at the scrapbooking store that I went to in those days for a crop, and they always had food at the crops. This is a real flattering picture of me not. She decided to take this picture, and she actually created this page for me. I don't know if I should have been insulted or flattered that she did this, because it's got an awful lot of references to being a pig. One of my favorite poems, and I explain why. And this is a portrait of my mother and father. And a play that I was in many years when I was in Teachers College. I played in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and these were old pictures that I was able to find. I had to rescan them into my computer and reproduce them. So they're not the best quality. That's me in a short little skirt. You can hardly see it. This is also me. I was Erroneous, the guy who has to run the 7 hills of Rome. And every so often in the middle of the play, I would come out on stage dressed like this, and I would run down through the audience counting the number of times I had to run around the supposed hills of Rome. If you've never seen A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, you should see it. It's a hilarious movie. And then there's stuff about books I was reading and books that are important to me. Little library card right here I did. You know, to fit in with the theme. And This page was a page that I actually used in my classroom when I started to incorporate scrapbooking techniques with my curriculum in my English class, and I forget what I had the kids do, but this was sort of an idea for them to show them as an example. So you can see my style was starting to evolve in this early album. I was starting to do a little bit more matting. I was starting to get a little bit more adventuresome with the way that I did titles and journaling and things like that and embellishments. But of course, this is a far cry from what I eventually evolved into. And so next time, we'll take a look at maybe another specialty album and see how my style has changed from there. So next week, I'll be looking at maybe some of my travel journals as well, or albums, scrapbooking albums. So we'll go on from there. I hope this is something you're finding enjoyable to watch. Let me know in the show notes below. Because my idea here is over the next few weeks, I'm eventually going to move you from my scrapbooking days into my transition to mixed media and beyond. And I'm hoping that out of these as well, you'll get some tips and tricks that you may have never heard of that you might want to try in your own creative endeavors. Okay, so speaking of creative endeavors, it's now time for my next installment of my series on journal making. Okay, so this week, as I work on this album, what I did during the week was I took each one of those pieces from the iCraft kit for making the album, and I scanned them into my computer, and then I imported them into my Cricut Maker, so now I can actually cut out from pattern paper each of the pieces. So you see, I've labeled each one of these just as a guide for myself. These would not be the actual pieces that I'd be putting into the album, but here's the front cover, and I include the score lines as well, because you can do that in a Cricut Maker. And then I have the front or the back cover, and anything that's white I've labeled as an insert. So this would be an overlay on top of the basic background paper. What I'll probably be doing is I'll cut all the basic backgrounds and pages in black, and then I'll use the pattern paper, I'll cut it to lay on top. So I've done that for everything, the large and the small pocket, also with the score lines. This is an actual album page, and it has the score lines for that, and then this will be the insert that'll fit on this. I did not put the score lines on this. I made it about 1/4 of an inch all the way around smaller. So when I glue it, I can just go over the score lines in there as I fold it, and that should keep it in place. And then this is the small inserts and the enclosure. Now I didn't do an insert for over the pocket pages because getting the proportions right on that, because of the cutout that's here, was not working very well. But I think what I'll probably do is I will just cut a duplicate piece, score lines and all, and then I'll cut it off, all the score parts I'll cut off, and I'll just glue it right on top. Or either that, or what I'll do is I might just make the whole pocket just a solid piece without a border, and lay that in. So it'll have the score lines, it'll fold over, and if I want to make a bit of a border, I think I could probably go around the edges with some ink. So I have all of these are my templates now, and they're all in my Cricut Maker, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting out the basic pieces for the album itself, the background pieces, and then I can cut the overlay pieces. So I've cut out the basic pieces for my album cover, the front and the back, and those were in 2 pieces, and I had the score lines. One of the things I found a little difficult was to see where my score lines were, because the Cricut Maker, although it's got a scoring tool, does not do a really great job of making really strong score lines. Now, it does have a rotary scoring tool, but that doesn't seem to work when you're just cutting cardstock. That seems to be for heavier materials, and I'm not sure how to make that work with even if I can make it work with a lighter cardstock. But nevertheless, I could visually see them, so I just took my ruler, put them up against the score line, and folded the paper over accordingly. Now, how did I assemble this? Well, I didn't use glue. Glue will warp, or most glues will warp your cardstock a little bit. So what I like to use is a good quality double-sided tape, and this is Sukwang tape, which is very, very strong. This is the 1/2 inch size, this is the 1/4 inch size, and I just put a strip of that down on the little fold here that attaches the back cover to the front. I don't know if you can see the outline of that. And I use my bone folder as well to go over it to make sure it makes a good contact. I did the same only with the 1/4 inch tape on the flap that holds the book together. And you'll also notice I've added a magnet here and here, and this will serve as a closure. Now right now this is a little bit limp because there's nothing in it, but that's what that is there for. And what will happen is I put those on now because when I put my decorative paper on top of this, it'll hide the magnets. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to cut out the decorative papers for the front and the back cover, the inside, the outside, and the spine, and this flap, and assemble that and show you what that looks like. And that'll give you an idea of how I'm going to be doing this entire album. Now I have my overlay pieces all cut for my cover, and what I want to do though is I want to go around all the edges with a little bit of ink, and I'm going to use the Stays On brown ink for this because Stays On will not come off on your hands once it is dry. If I use distress inks on this, they would be more prone to be reactivated by any kind of moisture, like moisture from your hands or just if it gets wet, whereas this won't. So show you what I mean here, what I'm going to do. I'm just getting my ink applicator well stocked up with ink, and then I'm just going to take it and I'm just going around the edges. Now this is subtle, it's more like a shading, but it'll just make it look a little bit more finished when I'm done. And I intend to do this with all of my pieces, not just the cover pieces, but also the page pieces and any inserts as well. I find it just gives it a nice vintage look, and at the same time makes it stand out just a little bit more from the background, even though that the background is black. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here to do all of my pieces for the cover, and I'll come back and show you how I'm going to install these. Okay, so now I have all of my pieces inked, and I'm going to work on the inside of the album cover. So I'm going to start with the flap because the flap is going to go underneath the cover pages that are inside here. So I want to cover those up first. So I'm going to grab one of these, and it doesn't matter what side I use particularly. I think I will use this side. And I realized something here, that this is actually too long. And the reason for that is because I think what I did was I had made one that was going to be the insert to go on top of this and leave a border all the way around it, and the other was the actual flap. And I think what I did was I ended up cutting out the smaller of the two pieces. But that's okay because no one's going to see this part. I could cut this off if I wanted to, but I don't think I'll bother. It just gives it more support. So I'm working on the inside first, and I've decided to use a wet glue, and I'm going to use Tombow Aqua because out of many of the glues that I have used over time, I have found that the Tombow Aqua tends to not wrinkle the paper as much. I could use double-sided tape all the way around, but I want this to have a really good seal because this is going to get opened up and closed a lot. So I just want to make sure that there's glue on, a good application of glue. And I want to make sure I get all the edges. So you'll notice that I am doing this on my nonstick craft mat, because it'll just roll up right off that. Okay. This also gives me a little bit more wiggle room when I line it up, as opposed to the double-sided tape. Double-sided tape, once you lay something down on it, you don't have any wiggle room whatsoever to move it about. Okay, flip this over. Now I have a little bit of overhang up here on the end, but I can trim that off, but I'm not going to bother right now. I'll wait until I get this part on, and then I'll just maybe do a little bit of trimming if I don't get it quite even. And give it a good rub, and I like to use my bone folder for this too, just to press it all in. And now you see that the little magnet piece has now been covered up as well on this side. Just put my cap on the glue here, and I'm just going to grab a baby wipe because I want to wipe up some of that. There we go. Non-stick craft sheet are wonderful inventions. If you don't have one, get one. And I just want to grab a paper towel, which is off camera, just to wipe up the moisture from the baby wipe. And now let's see if I've got any pieces hanging out. I do, just by a hair, so I'm just going to trim that off. The other side looks pretty good. Okay. Now we can work on the inside, and these are going to be my inside parts. And these I cut down a little smaller so I leave a little bit of a border around, and I have the spine piece as well. And these I am going to use the double-sided tape for. So just show you how to go about this. I get it as close to the edge as I possibly can, because you don't want the edges coming up. Of course, I got a little bit of a wrinkle in that one, but that's not a problem. Excuse me. And I'm going to lay a piece diagonally across the center as well. Now, before I peel off the protective backing, I always go over it with my bone folder just to make sure it's well adhered to this page. And then I peel off the backing. Now, I use a little paper piercer for this because I don't have any fingernails. If you've got fingernails, you probably can get a hold of the edge of this. And believe me, this Sukwang double-sided tape is extremely sticky. So now we've got to be careful when we lay this down, because we want to get it to align as close to center, because once you lay it down, you cannot get it up again. Okay, that looks pretty good. Again, I'll take my bone folder to this to make sure I've got a good adhesion. And I'm going to do the same thing on this part, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the back, and I'll be back to show you the final version. Okay, so I have my album cover done in terms of just putting the basic structure together and putting on some decorative paper on the outside. Now, of course, I'm going to embellish this when I get all the pages inside it with some other things. But I do have a couple of things to point out to you that has some mishaps off camera. One, my magnet was not strong enough to go through these, so I put a couple of Velcro dots on here to seal it. Here's what the interior looks like right now. Also, I intended for this piece of paper to be my cover page and this to be my back page. Well, I got them reversed. But you know, that's not going to give me much of a problem because I am going to be embellishing this anyway, so this is just background paper for the time being. So I also added a little bit of glue onto the back of each of these Velcro dots because although they are self-sticky, I find they don't hold that well. So I just put a little of the Tombow glue that I was using onto the back of each of these, and that should hold them in place as time goes by. Another thing that you might want to note is at first the album's going to seem a little limp, okay, but it does get stronger as you add more layers of paper to it. So right now the basic cardstock that's under here is just your standard cover stock weight, but by adding the sheets of decorative paper to the inside and the outside, it's now getting a little bit more substance to it. And once I get the pages in here, it will have a lot more substance to it. And just speaking of the pages that are going inside and what I'm using as overlays, I didn't show you the Graphic 45 pad that I'm using. And I'm using the Deluxe Collector's Edition of the one they call Communique, or K. Communique or Communique. I think that's how you say it. This is what I'm using, but I may not have enough in this set to do the whole album, so I may intermix it with another set as well, and that's okay. It makes it look, I think, more interesting. Also, don't throw away your scraps when you're working on the project. I've taken these, I've trimmed off the ones that are too small to use, and I just dropped them into a page protector, and I may need to come back to some of these when I'm embellishing the album itself. Okay, so on the next video, I'm going to show you the interior pages. And so we'll move on with that project next week. All right, so events in the past week. Mom's fine. We had a meeting at the nursing home. They have one of these once a year. They call it the post-entry, well, this one was called the post-entry meeting, where we just go over how my mother's adjusting and things they have noticed. They didn't include her in this meeting, which I found a little surprising, but I suppose if I'd wanted her there, I could have requested it without any problem. But to be honest, I didn't want her there. So we discussed what she's doing. She's eating. Her weight has been maintained at 105 pounds. My mother is not a big woman. And she seems to be participating in things. They keep really accurate records of what she's been doing, what she's been eating, everything. They are so good there. We lucked out. You know, originally I didn't want that. I didn't even have that particular home that she's in now on her waiting list because there were so many bad stories about it. But it was owned by a different company at the time, and this is another company that's taken it over, and they are wonderful. They're building a new facility. It won't open until 2020, and it's my hope that my mother will be able to be moved to the new facility because this is an old one she's in. The new ones are so much better in terms of their layout, and they're newer and the decor and everything like that. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, that's not for another year. So, but so far she seems to be adjusting much better. And I talked to her yesterday on the phone, and she was munching on a cookie and seemed to be okay. So that makes me feel good before we go off to Florida, knowing that she's, you know, no worries at the present time, so I can relax a little bit. Okay, Quilting Guild was this past week. We were in a new facility, much better than what we were in before. This has better acoustics, a better setup, the whole bit. It was a little chilly because they have just finished the renovations, but the gas hadn't been yet turned on, so they had electric heaters in there. They did warn us about that. You know, you might want to bring a sweater or something. I didn't find it too bad, but I know some of the ladies were kind of cold, but we knew that was going to happen. So, you know, and it's by the time of the next guild meeting, I'm sure the heat will be on. I showed my modern quilt, which I've shown you before, and because they have a show and share, and I like to show and share. But boy, there's some beautiful quilts in there. These ladies are so talented. It just humbles me when I see what they've created. Ultimate Sewing had their open house. They have this twice a year, and this is when they you can sign up for various classes. So as usual, Walter and I were there early. We weren't going to sign up for very many classes because a lot of the classes fell while we were when we were in Australia. So we wouldn't be able to, we'd miss some of the classes, so we didn't want to do that. But as a result, I ended up signing up for 4 classes. And here's the weird thing about it. Put yourself into a stressful situation much, right? I signed up for 4 classes. All 4 classes start when we get back from Florida and all end just before we go to Australia. At one point, for several weeks in a row, I'm taking 3 classes a week. I might as well get a cot and move right in there and stay overnight. But the quilts, 3 of them are quilts that I'm doing. One of the quilts is a bit of a challenge because it has something called Y seams. And it's where 2 points sort of come together and you have to pivot the material. Everybody cringes when they hear about Y seams, at least they do on YouTube. So I have watched some videos on YouTube about Y seams, but still, you know, it's not the same as going there and doing it. So I'm taking the class. The quilt, it's called Dynamic, and it is. It's a gorgeous quilt. And one of the other classes I'm taking is actually to create an art quilt. It looks like a landscape, but it's done with paper piecing. Now, I've done a little paper piecing before, but not much. So this will be more on the scale of what Walter did when he did the applique landscape type of quilt. And then we're both taking a rug floor mat, they call it, class, where you use a jelly roll, and it's all very trendy right now to do this, to take these strips of fabric and batting and sew them in a coil around and around till you got what looks like a braided rug, essentially. I said before I wasn't really interested in that because after you spend all that time and effort making a rug, I don't want people's dirty feet on my rug, you know, really. But Walter was interested in it, and then I got thinking, well, yeah, you know, it's another technique, why not? So we're both taking that class together. And Walter's taking a class in basic quilting this time. He kind of jumped the gun before when he did his applique quilt because he didn't know the terminology or anything like that, whereas this class he's taking now will teach him the basic terminology and everything. And then I have an ultimate plan. Once he's taken that class, and we are going to a retreat in March for 4 days, a sewing retreat, I would kind of like that we do a team quilt together. He's really interested in learning the quilting part of it, like free motion, and we'll probably eventually, both of us will take the free motion quilting course with the long arm. But I like piecing. The quilting part, I like, but I'm still very unsure of myself with it. So I'm thinking, okay, he gets good at long arm quilting, I get good at piecing. We design quilts together. 2 guys and a quilt, we can call it. Whatever, I don't know. These are just ideas that float through my brain. Okay, oh yes, we got our points back, as I mentioned on Stephen and Walter Live. That's why we created the free haul. We spent over $400 in our points. We still have $200 worth of points left. So long story short, it's all been solved. Still, we're not going to be saving up the points. We're spending them as we go. When we get enough to use for $10 worth of stuff or whatever, we're going to use them. I'm not going to take the chance that they're going to go bye-bye again. So like I said, if you want to see that video about the free haul and I explained the situation in a little bit more detail on it, the link is in the show notes below. So we're off to Florida tomorrow, hopefully, as from what I've already told you. What are we going to do when we're in Florida? Anything we want to. It'll just be nice to go someplace warm, although our winter here has not been that bad in our area. In fact, there's areas south of the border that have had a ton of snow, and we've got like nothing right here. We've only had little trace amounts of snow. Doesn't mean we won't get it. Probably we'll get it just like when we're about to fly to Australia, and we'll get a big dump and our plane will get delayed or canceled or something like that. Well, not to be a pessimist or anything. However, so we'll go down there. We're staying at a guest house. It's with a guy that, it's a gay guest house. We have stayed in his guest house before, but a few years ago he sold it, and now he's bought this one. So we're expecting it'll be pretty good. It's got good reviews on TripAdvisor as well, and this guy that ran it before ran it very, very well. So we'll hit some quilt shops. We'll have a rented car. We'll go out. We'll dine and play and have a good time with it. At least that's my hopes for it. And as long as we can get there, that's the way it'll be. So that brings up some information I want to share with you about my next vlog and the next Stephen and Walter Live. I don't know if I'll do a vlog next Monday. It's going to depend on what we have for an internet connection. So if you don't see a vlog next week, don't panic. It's just because we're away. As for Stephen and Walter Live, we are going to try to do a live broadcast. We'll aim for our usual time, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Florida's in the same timeline as we are. But again, that's going to depend on what we have for an internet connection and whether or not that's going to work. I probably will do some video of our time down in Florida, and I may post it like I did with Australia as it happens. It won't be really live. It'll be at the end of a day or something like that I'll put it up. Or when I get home, I'll just string a bunch together and have it as a special segment on either the vlog or, yeah, probably be the vlog. It won't be on Stephen and Walter Live because the technology, we don't have the technology to be able to cut from live to something that's already pre-recorded with that. So we'll see. So I guess basically what I'm saying is, if you don't hear from us for a week, we're still around. We're just on vacation. Okay? Okay, so that's it for me today. I hope you have a really good week. I hope we get to Florida. And yeah, so we'll see you sometime soon. Bye-bye for now.